Well, I want to welcome everybody to a meeting of the ways here on KKUP, courtesy of our listener supporters. And we have a great show. We're going to be playing some music, and we're also going to be talking to our special guest, Eugenio Negro. He's an activist, he's an artist, he's a writer, he's a cartoonist. He publishes independently from his home base in San Jose, California. He's a father. He's got a 5-year-old, and he has a new book called Byebye and Shlort. And what else didn't I say about you that I should have?
That was perfect. Thanks. Órale a todos.
And
good evening.
Thank you. And I guess maybe we'll begin with your new book. This book was, I will say, this is my read on it, 338 pages of very painful reading. It is about the plight of, the main character is a homeless youth, a young lady who is going to be aging out of the foster care system, family life in shambles, I think largely due to many of the economic mishaps that are befalling people. The jobs just aren't so plentiful here anymore as they used to be, and she's unhoused, she's homeless. So it's really the day-to-day. If you want to know at the granular level, I got a sense of what it's like at the granular level to be homeless every single day and struggling to get yourself off medications, which are a solution for a lot of depressed and people in dire situations, and trying to make a life and trying to rescue other family members. And maybe that's enough about me. I thought maybe I would just read a passage from the book that I thought kind of exemplified it. There's so much here. So this is the main character, Byebye. Mm-hmm. Is that how you pronounce her name? And she's just left her group home because she just wants to be off meds. She wants to start a life for herself. She's going to be 18 soon, and she doesn't want to be so left hanging when she ages out. And she's living on the street. It's her first nights unhoused outdoors, and she has a good friend who's she's with, but I thought this paragraph kind of exemplified. Probably she's writing this in her journal at 2:30 a.m. and it's 37 degrees outside. Probably the usual sort of first night out daydreams in a head, both fighting sleep and grasping after it. Huge inventories of possessions and safety issues to maintain. Bags and boxes leak and important things get wet. 1,000 pairs of eyes wait for the chance to steal. Not knowing if something missing got blown away in the draft of passing tail lamps or if it got stolen. Dried Spanish oat pokes up from the ground and perforates possessions, making it uncomfortable to sleep. Every tree an aggressive or drugged human getting caught by cops. Anyway, why don't you tell us that, as a layperson reading the book, that was what I have to say about it, but I'd like to hear you tell us about your book.
My new book is about, it's pretty much the question, what are young people supposed to expect of this whole situation that we are choosing to impose upon ourselves day to day in the Bay Area? I just try to look at it from young people's perspective, and what would they be seeing? What would they be trying to deal with? And this kind of started as a self-indulgent book about loneliness and the lack of communication. But I always like to have a character who's worthy of it, that the dominant society is not really paying enough attention to. And this was wholly inspired, it says in the back of the book, Karen Desaw's series for the Mercury News, or I should say for the Bay Area News Group, called Drugging Our Kids. Once I read that, then I kind of decided that's what Byebe's situation was going to be.
Well, unhoused, needing a home, and then just the day-to-day walking the streets, trying to find places to be. Yeah,
well, I'm going to forget being 17 pretty soon. So part of this book was me putting my 17-year-old brain into it, what's left of it, because I'm very old, despite my voice. So what I remember really well about being 17 is just, you can't, and this is the joke of the middle of the book, if you straighten out the middle of the book, which is a spiral, it's like you can't learn things fast enough to respond to a situation. So every lesson from life comes too late to have made anything easier. That's kind of, I want to make sure I got that right.
So you use that, did you talk to unhoused people? Because it just seemed like, I don't know many. I know the neighborhood where a lot of these things happened, and I know exactly where they were walking and when, and it just seems so realistic about finding places to sleep and how people reacted and where things were. It seemed like another culture that I don't know about, but also the landscape seemed realistic. I think you did more. Did you do more than just read a journalist's account of some of this?
Oh yeah. Well, I spent a lot of time outside, so this is what I had handy. That environment. I spent a lot of time on the Guadalupe Trail just because I do. Partially because of trying to get a newborn to take a nap. I taught myself to read while pushing a stroller. This was 4 years ago already. And so I read 2666 and Gravity's Rainbow and all these books while I'm walking a stroller. And eventually I started going, I loved downtown San Jose so much, I got to start taking textures. So between the camera on my phone, and whatever. But also just hanging out in parks and stuff, which is normal for me. I have a lot of acquaintances who have been chronically unhoused. And they're not actually even in this book. Because they didn't fit with Bayani's predicament. So, yeah, by the time it came to write the book, I had all this. This is all experience I've already had just from being around, And I thought, it would be really nice to document for the future, some respectful observation on that situation.
Well, tell me about your unhoused friends.
My favorite is who will go unnamed. I haven't seen him for a while, but he says, I'm a Navajo Indian. I don't need to stand for any of this. So I guess he's elderly, but his wife got tired of him, so now he just lives in his truck and goes between his kid's house. So there's not just one kind of unhoused person. It's all. What I need to stress is it's all our neighbors. It's all people like us, and it's as many different situations as there are people who are housed.
That's new information. And if you've just joined us, my guest today is Eugenio Negro. He is an artist, writer, cartoonist. He is an independent publisher. He puts out zines. His home base is here in San Jose. And he's a dad. And he's got a new book. And you can reach him if you want this book. The easiest way is to email him at negrocomics@gmail.com. So maybe... what did you learn in writing the book? Because did you talk to a lot of unhoused youths or unhoused foster youths or anything like that? As
it says there's kind of a manifesto in the back of the book. For the reader, it's like it's a sources list, but for me, it's kind of a manifesto. And I did not approach youth. I happen to have access in my private life to a couple of foster youth. To one of my family members. I'll just come out and say it. My wife used to be a foster youth. And I have an ex-girlfriend who's a foster youth, it's pretty common. That stuff and just people who I knew around, I was not going to go up to strange kids and I felt like I'd be exploiting them if I was to ask them what's it like, So I relied on Karen Desa's work, which is fantastic. And then a lot of the unhoused adults I talked to would give me stuff that I digested into what happens in the book. I won't say that I went and hung out at the shelf very often. It was maybe once or twice where I actually was there in people's company, but I figured that's what I was going to get.
Yeah, well, I think if you can hear the sound of my voice and you're listening at 91.5 FM, I'm pretty safe in saying that you're seeing unhoused people along our freeways and byways in the Santa Cruz County, Santa Clara County, almost. So many different places. I don't know how it is where people are listening at kkup.org. But what do your unhoused friends have to say about this?
It's nothing so. They're so busy dealing with their lives that there's not like a. Not that you asked this, but there's not like a victimhood thing, whatever. The people who I have had small interactions with, like on the light rail, who have medication issues because they don't want to end up like mentally ill on the street. They have kind of like a frustration they express, but the people who I hang with who are unhoused, they don't complain about it. They're just trying to do their thing. And one of them, Gio, who was one of my best informants on that setting on the cover of the book, which is called The Shelf, he said, all I want you to tell them is that we're, ingenuous, or what's the word, ingenuity, that we're good at handling our lives. Yeah. And I really respect that. There's not, they're too busy making it to analyze it. It's like Goethe said, only the bystander has a conscience.
And that's your main character. Toward the end of the book, there's opportunities for her to get housed.
Yeah.
And she's so busy just trying to stay on top of keeping track of her little brother and trying to get a hold of her father and dealing with someone who's mentally ill who might be harassing her and all of these other things. She... when the social worker first called her, I'm like, gosh, I hope she calls right away.
Yeah.
But you could see that you get like they're on a treadmill.
Right, and that was kind of a dramatic choice.
24/7 they're on a treadmill.
Right.
finding places to be, trying to find work.
Yeah, and even when I was a housed young person, I was on a treadmill anyway, trying to like get a better job and get my community college work done. You know, that's just what it feels like to be young, is you're always on a treadmill.
Well, yeah, here in the Valley, you have to, unless you're wealthy from a wealthy family, right, you are hustling to get yourself through college, to get yourself work, to get yourself a place to live. Maybe you could tell us, you seem so passionate about all this. There's a social justice element to you, and you write about. Where did that come from?
I mean, Steinbeck. I was educated to help. Like, that was the thing. A lot of young people don't know this now, but self-esteem is like the one that won. There were several movements when I was a kid. There was self-esteem in school, and there was also what they used to call peace building. And so we would have service projects and stuff, and I started volunteering as a labor organizer in Santa Cruz when I was like 18. So I don't know how to do anything but try to help a little, And so for me, it's authentic. It's just what I have going on.
Mm-hmm. And maybe you can tell us, when we were preparing for the program, you were talking about, maybe we should talk about what you've been reading. I would love that, because I find out what to read actually from the New York Times. They have a really good book review, and a book I found last year, 2 of them that I read, one was a huge book about Henry David Thoreau, and you can find it at our library. It's like 700 pages, and then the other one was These Truths by Jill Lepore. She is the chair of Harvard University's history department, and she's also just the top historian ever. And she thought we needed a U.S. history book, and thought we needed an old-fashioned civics lesson. And oh my gosh, what she really nails in it's huge. The book is huge. It's like 800 pages. I have to take breaks from it. It's been a war of financial interests against democracy. And she soft pedals that at the beginning of the book, but it's like all the details of all of these injustices through the whole history.
Yeah, there's a lot of sources. There's Labor's Untold Story, which has been published by the Electricians Union since like 1950s, with kind of like the early bit, the 1860s to the 1950s. That's a really quick and dirty read that anyone can read. It's funny you mentioned Thoreau, because I just finished 2 nights ago the Margaret Fuller biography, which was bloody fantastic.
Is that the big thick one?
No, it's not nasty.
Okay, this one was really big.
Yeah, it wasn't. I don't know about Thoreau, but this one was focused on Margaret Fuller.
Oh, okay, Margaret Fuller. I'm sorry, I thought
which
you were
is
talking
who's
about
one of my one of my heroes. Oh, yeah, a lot of people haven't. So. I read a lot because I have to read Latin American literature. I want to read, German early democratic movements literature. I just have this huge list that I can't seem to get through. So I just read a lot. I read 50 books Meat Ladder to Mars, which is my last book, and this one. These were break books because I had started something in about 2014, 2013 that I wasn't good enough to write. And so I had to get all this slush out of me and become a better writer, doing these things, which, were relatively simpler. And so I read 50 books, 50 novels, just because I couldn't do anything else with a toddler in the house. And then I made this huge outline, right? And that's how I come up with this book. I got to the point where I was so spooled up, as my editor says, from reading awesome books and planning, where all I had left to do was just put it down. And that was really fun. And I'm going to keep doing that forever, because I read too much, so might as well use that method,
Well, I think, why don't we have a music break? I thought we'd play some music of resistance here at KKUP, because we can do that here. Well, you're listening to KKUP Cupertino, Weeding of the Ways, and my special guest is Eugenio Negro. And just wanted to remind you that the views and opinions on this program aren't necessarily the views and opinions of the staff, management, and other listeners of KKUP. And I want to thank you for joining us today. So Eugenio Negro is here talking about his new book, Byebye and Shlort. Why don't you tell us in a nutshell, for listeners who just joined us, what's it about?
It's a book about young people trying to figure out how they're going to get themselves started in San Jose, mid-20-teens. And it's about foster system, medication.
They're unhoused.
They're
day-to-day.
Yeah, being unhoused. But considering the material, I think it came off pretty lighthearted.
If that's lighthearted, then I there's so much I need to know about the suffering of people in this situation that are in the book. And you cover, and then so there are sort of asides in there, or subtext about the displacement going on, the lack of opportunities.
Yeah.
These are youths that are close to 18 years old, or some of the main character is going to turn 18. and ages out of the foster care system, and the people she's hanging with are just a teeny bit older, and then their parents are struggling, and there's no safety net for them. Maybe you could speak to that.
Yeah, I don't know what to say, but again, the question for me is just how are kids supposed to think about, how are young people or anybody supposed to think about this, I mean, I'm in a pretty comfortable spot now, but, at any time, if I were to change anything, I would be in big trouble. And I thought I would get in a little more trouble for this one than I have. Maybe it just hasn't happened yet, but,
for this book?
Yeah, when I go out, bringing up human trafficking and stuff, I think, oh, am I going to get away with this? And then, the slavery towers thing in San Jose comes out. And then like a week after that, the Epstein case comes out. So, I'm trying so hard to write fiction. I just can't seem to.
Yeah, it's not. And, San Jose has made a huge effort. And there's some wonderful organizations trying to address human trafficking right here.
Yeah. Well, this is the hub. And that's what Byebye in the book kind of finds out. This is where it all happens. A friend of mine who used to work at the Metro, we were talking before I started writing this, is right before I started. She said, we used to complain about that at the Metro, that even our little newspaper, is paid for potentially with human trafficking, because when you look in the back of the newspaper, it's all this massage stuff, right? And people just, I think one reason I had to make it a little ugly, although I found the book kind of silly once I finished it, just because I had, I think my characters are fun kids, but I kind of want to point that in people's eye, that you come out of the school system into the professional world, and your choices are, fast food and human trafficking,
Yeah, it's harder and harder. Definitely, I'm an older person, and I can see there were so many jobs here. That's why we had a low crime rate for so long. Anybody could just, you could even lie about your high school education and find your way into a responsible job at there were blue-collar worker jobs here, union jobs. The high-tech companies had distribution centers here, manufacturing, quality control, all kinds of jobs anyway.
Well, yeah, and that's, we were talking about maybe we should, mention what's my solution, like Marx or whoever, I'm good at coming up with problems, but not, I'm not an expert on the solutions. But anyone who is listening and doesn't know what to do, the first thing you can do is just, if we stop supporting the economy that makes this stuff, human trafficking and homelessness, it'll go away. If you're despairing about homeless neighbors while purchasing things off of Amazon, this is not KKUP's opinion, then I don't know what you're asking yourself. There are concrete paths to this kind of poverty.
Yeah. I guess my personal opinion was not the opinion of Radio KKUP, is because I've seen it, is we have multinational corporations that are headquartered here that have civil rights but no civil responsibilities. Right. And since the 1970s, they've been able to, through favorable income tax laws, they're able to park their intellectual property offshore, so they're not taxed on the revenue that they're making here. So they're not paying their fair share of taxes here. To me, that's it in a nutshell. Yeah,
and also people might be forgetting, was it 5 years ago already? Up until 5 years ago or so, or 4, after the earthquake, we had enterprise zones. And enterprise zones, that was the beginning of the end. That was a state policy. The town I come from had this happen. A big strip mall came in and all the mom and pop died, right?
That's been happening.
Where all these corporations could come in and just...
that's happened since the 70s, because I saw it happen. But,
sure.
On the labels of my clothing, I saw Made in the USA disappear.
Right.
And so Walmart came in, companies like this, big box stores.
Yeah.
And it's not the baby boomers, it's everybody who is thrilled to be able to get a $12, sweatshirt or $12 down jacket. So is you partaking in all that is part of it.
We can abandon this system at any time. Helping each other is so hard now. Because what are you going to do? You're going to invite like four unhoused people into your house for the night. Like, that would be super cool if you do that, right? And maybe that's what the 20s should be about, is,
I know,
how many people have I helped this week?
I wish I was that kind of person.
Materially.
And I'm afraid.
Yeah. So there's that to do, but there's also just, if you don't like it, we can starve these systems out. Stop giving them your money.
Yeah.
So, that's, I thought that 2666 was going to be like the big influence on this
2666.
Yeah, by Roberto Bolaño.
Is that a book?
Yeah, it's a big novel. It's 5 of these.
2066.
Yeah, it's 5 of these put together. That came out in 2003 and he died. It wasn't finished, but it's pretty good, considering.
And what's the author?
Roberto Bolaño. He's from Chile, but he died in Spain. And so I read that because I was on a big Bolaño trip for, a couple of years. And then I read, all the other stuff. But everything I do goes back to like, Ariel Dorfman and Steinbeck and now Bolaño later on in my life, where it's like we have to document what really made things happen, you know? I thought 2666 would be like a conspicuous in this book, and I'm glad to say it's not. But actually Dahlgren kind of, if I ripped off any book by accident on this one, it's Dahlgren by Delaney, which also deals with, in his era, this was like the late 60s black inner city, right? And so it's just like an approach, right? It's fun, it's fantasy, but it's also got this approach from the ground up.
And then what is it, sort of the dystopia, the actual dystopia of developers coming in and destroying neighborhoods?
2666 is about the maquiladoras on the border of the United States. And this has been going on since I was in high school, where, you know, you have to, if you want to work in a Victoria's Secret plant, you know, making underwear or whatever, you have to stay there for like 4 years. And they won't pay you until your contract is up, despite what might happen to you.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, it's been going on for like 20 years now. So, there's, you know, stuff I read encouraged me, you know.
Yeah, we've had Dr. Ann Lopez on our program many times. She's the founder of farmworkerfamilies.org. Mm-hmm. And she earned her PhD from UC Santa Cruz, proving, because it was anecdotal before, that the reason so many workers were coming here without documents from Mexico happened because of NAFTA.
Oh, yeah.
And
what would you do?
Well, they were supposed to phase out, the Mexican government was going to phase out farm subsidies over many years. And that's how many families got by in Mexico perfectly fine by selling their corn to the government.
Yep.
But the subsidies ended much sooner, and all of a sudden people were destitute.
I wish I could remember the title. There's a really, again, for the listeners who don't have a lot of time, there's a really doable documentary. You have to speak Spanish, I think. I can't remember. But there's a documentary made only a couple of years ago about corn farmers in Mexico, and they brag, you know, they say, Mexican corn is scientifically proven better than North American corn. I mean, there's no snow, right? But, after NAFTA, just the price of everything, even if the Mexican government hadn't changed the subsidy, the price of corn in Mexico just evaporated. You know, it was like their gold standard, you know? So, all this stuff, you can't make it up.
Yeah. So I want to thank you for joining us. Is there anything else you want to tell our listeners today?
Just practice loving and forgiving each other, because it takes practice. Read more, please.
Well, anyway, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to take a music break with Buffalo Springfield.